Well, ladies and gentlemen, you asked for it. Or more accurately, I promised it, but you have been waiting and waiting and waiting for this review, so here it is. In 2005 was published what has since become one of the most overhyped pieces of literature in the past decade, Stephenie Meyer's Twilight. The story of a delusional girl and her sparkly vampire boyfriend. Such was the popularity of said novel that, what else? They made a movie. And boy, what a movie. The movie version of Twilight came out in 2008, starring Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson, and directed by Catherine Hardwicke. A virtual treasure trove of wooden acting, awful special effects, and some of the most hilariously misguided directing you're likely to see outside of a Tommy Wiseau film. So, deciding which version of the story is better is kind of the same as one of those hypothetical questions you ask about which torturous death you'd rather experience. But alas, that is precisely what we have to do. And so, this is Books vs. Movies Review... No, you know what, Hatter, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Didn't we make a promise at the beginning of this project never, ever to do a Books vs. Movies review of Twilight? Doesn't that promise supersede the promise that we foolishly made to our subscribers? No, you know, I'm sorry, Hatter, I can't do it. Now, Matt, as you know, the hat that I wear allows me to become more reasonable and rational, and as such, I'm right there with you. Let's get the hell out of here.
Hi. Hi, folks. Don't worry. He's not really gone. I mean, that is to say, we'll find him. But, in the meantime, yeah, I guess we should, get on with the review. So, here is Books vs. Movies, Twilight Edition. Oh, God. Well, seeing as how this review centers around a romantic couple, and we're using the term romantic very loosely here, it seems only fitting to start off by looking at Eaward and Bella. Sadly, these two have become somewhat iconic in the world of supernatural romance, though God help me if I can find anything remotely romantic about their relationship. Bella Swan moves from sunny Phoenix, where she lives with her mother, to rainy Forks, where her father resides. In the book, her motivation for moving is pretty weak. Though, to be fair, that may be because she whines about it constantly. Movie Bella is considerably less annoying, probably due to the fact that you don't have to hear every insipid thought that passes through her brain. I guess the downside to her, though, is that she's not quite as well developed. Because the story is told in first person, we get a little more insight into Bella's character. Now, granted, that character is a complete twit, but at least she's a well-developed complete twit. She's pretty unhappy until she meets Edward Cullen, who at first seems to hate her, and then wants to be friends with her, and then wants her to stay away, and then they're sporadically in love. Go figure. Edward, the other half of our couple, is pretty much a complete ass. He has very few redeeming qualities and actually comes off as kind of threatening. And not in the I'm a vampire way, but in the I'm a really creepy person who thinks of his girlfriend as bacon and likes to sneak into her room regularly to watch her sleep kind of way. Though they both have these traits, Edward from the movie is, again, a little more likable. Part of that has to do with the way Edward is written in the book. I don't know what it is, but somehow the Edward in the book seems like a worse actor than the actor who plays Edward in the movie. It's really quite astounding. Edward in the movie at least seems a little more genuine and realistic, if only a little. But I think what decides it is the relationship between the two. And despite how annoying they are, the relationship is definitely done better in the book. Don't get me wrong, it's impulsive, sporadic, and stupid, but at least it's believable. You do actually get the feeling that they really believe what it is they're saying. Which is kind of sad in and of itself, I know. But it's a more realistic portrayal of a relationship, even if it is a stupid one. In the movie, Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson have absolutely no chemistry on screen. I mean, none. Which is kind of ironic if you consider their relationship off camera. If someone told me that the two of their scenes were shot separately and then edited together in post-production, I wouldn't be a bit surprised. They're both so wrapped up in their own tortured pretentiousness that they forget they're supposed to be a couple. Also, neither of these two actors can do drama convincingly. I bought the happy moments, but I didn't buy any of the dramatic ones. And seeing how the entire story is supposed to revolve around the relationship of these two characters, it's helpful if the characters make you believe in the relationship. For that reason, the book seems to have the better portrayal here. And now... No, you know what? Screw it. I can see why Matthew left. I'm not doing this on my own. I'm not even a vlogger. I'm making a call.
And that's why Dracula and... Seriously, why does my phone always go off when I'm vlogging? Hey, it's Cassie. Cassie, hey! Fancy to hear from you when I'm sitting in front of my bookshelf with the camera on me.
Yeah, listen. I need you to continue with the review. Matthew ran off and I'm not doing it by myself.
Wait, Matt ran off? Oh, I'm gonna kill him. He is so dead.
Yeah. But listen, you need to do the bit about other characters.
No, I did my duty as girlfriend to this project. I read the damn book when I didn't have to.
Oh, you cannot play that card. You were not dating him yet when you did that, so you were technically performing best friend duties.
Alright, fine, true enough, but I am only doing one round of this.
Good luck.
Secunda, I ain't doing this alone, you ready? Bring it on. Although this is an extremely egocentric narrative, there are in fact a lot of other characters. Let's start with the vampires. Now, a lot of people have railed against the vampire mythology in this book, saying it is a complete slap across the face to traditional vampires. But this really isn't something I mind all that much. I don't really have any problems with non-traditional reimagining of mythical creatures. The problem is not that they're not traditional vampires, it's that Meyer does not explain the differences well. There are a few explanations to why the vampire myth exists, and Edward just kind of laughingly dismisses them whenever Bella brings them up. And the one major explanation of a vampire myth is just flat out stupid. I mean, okay, I know everyone's made fun of this, but really? Vampires sparkle in the sunlight. Regardless, the mythology is the one part of the story that is even remotely interesting. Maybe if she'd focus on that instead of the creepy romance, this would have been a better story. The movie doesn't really touch on the mythology, but it makes up for it by actually having vampires in the story. And I mean actual blood-sucking vampires, not the vegetarian ones. The vampires are introduced as an actual threat early on, and you really feel like something dangerous is looming. In the book, they don't even use the word vampire for most of the first half. Even then, the only exposure we have to the creatures is Edward, whose credentials are shaky at best. Honestly, this is where the interest lies in the movie. Not in the Edward-Bella relationship, but in the other characters and the drama of having this threaten their community. But the first, legitimately interesting part of the book is when Jacob is explaining to Bella the myth surrounding the vampires and werewolves. Which brings us to our second group of mythical beings, the werewolves. Obviously, these creatures are developed more in subsequent novels, but you start to hear about them here. And I'll admit, it's an intriguing myth. The mythology on the vampires might be underdeveloped and quite frankly stupid, but the mythology on the werewolves is actually intriguing. Again, it's one of those things that could have made the book better if she'd focused on that. This book just seems to be full of that sort of unrealized potential. But Jacob, who only makes a couple brief appearances in the book, is a lot more firmly established in the movie and has a lot more personality. Plus, the moral characters of the movie just blow the book characters out of the water. Again, it's because Bella of the book is so wrapped up with her own little drama that she colors everything with her perceptions. We see Charlie as awkward, the other students as shallow, and everyone else except the Cullens as beneath her because that is how she sees them. So everyone is colorless, vapid, and stupid. The main advantage of the movie over the book is that you get out of her freaking head! So you actually see the other characters as mildly interesting and likable people. Not as a bunch of people who are either shallow or just want to get into Bella's pants. In reality, the book doesn't really have other characters. Bella's ego and Edward's sparkliness just kind of shoves them out of the story. The movie's better characterization easily beats out the sloppy mythology of the book. Oh good god, I can't take this anymore. I am calling Amy.
Alicia? Hey, what's up? I'm just standing in front of a bookshelf that looks like Matt's for some reason.
Amy, you've got to do the composition round.
Seriously? Am I getting paid for this?
Come on, we need someone who's written about weird supernatural beings and death.
I'm not sure how dead magical ponies count, but I guess Rupert has about as much common sense as Bella. But you tell your boyfriend he owes me. Hi. Composition. Okay, so just to give you an idea of some of the wonderful work we're working with here, let me read a couple of excerpts. I waited for him to say something that made sense. The seconds ticked by. I pondered seeing his disappointed face again. In Jim. Jim, I groaned. I can take care of that. I hadn't noticed Edward moving to my side, but he spoke now in my ear. Go sit down and look pale, he muttered. Meyer seems to have a unique talent here. Grammar skills and word choice leave something to be desired, yet people still seem to find it engrossing. At least if they don't think about it too hard. However, if you really go through it and pay attention to the meaning, it's not quite deserving of tattooing it on your body and naming your children after characters in the book. The screenwriter did at least try to put together a good story. They kept some of the better, well-known lines from the book, and there actually seems to be an attempt to make the characters sound halfway intelligent.
Like my own personal brand of heroin.
With a few notable exceptions, of course. Also, I do give the movie credit for being one of the few films I've seen use narration effectively. Narration is tricky in a movie because so much of it is visual. If you're going to use it, it can't just be a description of what's going on screen. The audience typically has eyes, after all. It has to forward the story or develop the characters in some way. Narration in movies also has a tendency to disappear after the first 5 minutes. Not only do we get Bella's narration throughout the entire film, but it actually does help the story. She doesn't tell us something that we can't figure out for ourselves, and we do actually get a little bit of insight into what she's going through. And unlike the book, she doesn't come off as a vapid, self-righteous bimbo. Or at least not as much of one. Which is nice. I guess the one advantage to the book's composition is that it's told in first hand. You get to see what's happening to Bella and what's going through her head. You get a lot more insight into what's going on in a character's head when they're actually telling you. That said though, it's pretty much the only thing you see. We can't see the characters in any sort of realistic light because it's all Bella. And Bella, being completely out of touch with reality, sees everyone as being impale with the perfect sparkly kissy face Edward, or a little bit beneath her. On top of that, the pacing is just a mess. Half of the novel is just boring conversation, the other is boring description of Edward's perfection, and nothing happens for pages and pages except for whine this, whine that. The interesting stuff is just glanced over, and there isn't any sort of action or adventure until the end. For all its flaws, the movie does actually make you feel invested in some ways. The main plot is crap, but the subplots they throw in are actually a little engaging. We see this town struggling with a killer in their midst. We actually get a sense of danger and tension from the vampires behaving like vampires and killing things. Instead of Edward being angsty and talking about how dangerous he is with nothing to back it up. Seriously, this guy's over a century old? He acts like he's 15. So there does seem to have been an attempt to put together a decent story, and yeah, it fails, but not quite as badly as the book does.
Yellow.
You're doing imagery, sucker.
Well, it looks like I'm doing imagery. Just roll it. Okay, so it's not really a huge secret that the imagery in this movie is pretty bad. I mean, for a film about blood-sucking vampires, everyone in this movie seems pretty bloodless. I guess the washed out coloring is supposed to add to the atmosphere of the whole thing, and in a way it does. kind of. You definitely do get a feling of strangeness. And there are moments where it does draw a decent contrast between the dramatic situation that Bella is in and the relatively lighthearted and easygoing world of her classmates. All that being said though, I mean, come on, look at this thing. Really look at it. Have you ever seen a film trying so hard to be artsy and yet failing so miserably? I mean, this is Twilight, for God's sake, and you're gonna try to make it look like high art? Seriously? And on top of that, these special effects are, well, they're kinda special. I mean, they are hilariously bad. All that's missing from these running scenes is the Benny Hill music. And apparently when Edward goes into the sun, he turns into a cheap Photoshop filter. And then there's the action. Oh God, there's the action.
Prepare for the ultimate wire fighting maneuver. I just hope my wire fighting team is ready.
The book isn't much better, but I do give it credit for a few good descriptions here and there. I mean, yeah, most of them have to do with what a godlike being Edward is, but at least you get a decent sense of the gloominess of the location. It does actually create an atmosphere, albeit an extremely depressing one. But on that note, the movie does actually create the same atmosphere through its odd use of coloring and weirdly pretentious shots. Forks really does seem every bit as unpleasant here as it does in the book. And for all the rules that they break in the mythology, the vampires do actually kind of look like vampires. I mean, Edward's bedazzled hide notwithstanding, they do look enough like vampires that you kind of wonder why nobody seems to notice. But overall, this movie does have some pretty misguided direction. And I think the pinnacle of the goofiness has got to be this scene with Eaward and Bella together in the meadow. I mean, good God, you have never heard such hilariously misplaced music in your life. This movie doesn't know whether it wants to be a romance, an adventure, a coming-of-age story, a horror flick, or a Tommy Wiseau film, and a lot of that comes through in the music. I mean it, sometime, really just sit down and keep track of how many inappropriate music moments there are in this movie. Bottom line, the book may have some crappy writing, but at least it keeps a fairly consistent tone and sets a decent atmosphere. Whereas the movie just makes you giggle in strange and inappropriate ways. Alicia, get your car and meet me in my apartment in 10 minutes. We've got a certain band geek to find. Alright, you remember the plan?
Yeah, I'm gonna check the library, you're gonna check the Union Theater.
Awesome.
Matt, what are you doing here?
Trying to get some good literature back in my system.
This is an encyclopedia.
It's still better than Twilight.
You are pathetic. You're going to do this review sooner or later, so man up and do it.
I'm not doing the review. I don't care who it disappoints.
Fine. You know, if you're really starved for good literature, John Green just released a revised edition of the Zombie Apocalypse novella.
Really?
Yes. I have a copy in my car.
That sounds great. That was a dirty trick!
This is for your own good, Matt.
Give me one good reason why I should do this. You made a promise, Hatter. A promise to your fans. Doesn't that mean anything to you?
Of course it does, but I just can't do it anymore. I can't sit through that movie again.
Well, you're gonna have to do something.
Like what? Well, Since you refuse to go through with this Books versus Movies review, maybe you can do a different one.
Such as?
Don't tell this to anyone, but I have a cousin who works in Hollywood, and she was able to get me a pre-screened copy of the Hunger Games movie.
You're kidding.
I'm not. You'd be surprised what having a friend on the inside can do for you.
And you'd be willing to let me review it?
I don't see why not.
Let's do it then. No! I said I wouldn't do it! I won't! Matt, can you... Fine. Well, it's all tied up and it's time to decide which one of these stories sucks less. Alright, let me say this, first of all. Neither of these stories was as bad as I thought it was going to be. In fact, on the worth meter, I'd give them both equivocal levels of worth skimming and worth sitting through. Not stellar ratings to be sure, but they do both at least have some redeeming qualities and some potential to be better than they are. The book has a semi-interesting backstory with the legend of the werewolves and the vampires and the Cullens not wanting to kill people. If they'd focused more on the vampires and less on the pretentious romance, this could have been a decent book. The movie has the subplots going for it. It does actually create some decent drama and tension when we see how concerned Charlie and the other residents of Forks are about the killings. And I appreciate that they actually introduce threatening vampires towards the beginning of the film rather than just as an afterthought at the end. And even though I never gave a crap about the romance between Eaward and Bella, I did actually feel kind of invested in the other characters and what they were going through. And to be honest, Bella really isn't that bad at the beginning. She actually sort of has a reason for leaving her mother, she doesn't whine about it constantly, and she seems fairly cheerful and upbeat. That is until the sparkly one himself shows up. I give the book credit that when I first read it, it held my attention to the end of the novel, and I did actually feel compelled to read New Moon. A decision I still deeply regret. It pulls you into the drama and the atmosphere so much that when you're reading it for the first time and you haven't really learned how to read critically yet, you can completely ignore the fact that it's written like complete crap. Although, once you do notice that, it's all you notice. Twilight was a lot harder to read the second time around. And that, I think, is the bottom line. The movie is more entertaining. When you're looking at a crap story with few redeeming qualities, all that's left is entertainment value, and the movie beats the book out there easily. I'm not going to say that it's necessarily better than the book. In reality, they're probably about at the same level. Both require you to shut off your brain a little in order to get through them, but where the book becomes just boring and grating, the movie is absolutely hilarious if watched with the right attitude. In fact, I think this might be the first truly bad movie that I've ever watched and been honestly entertained by its horribleness. And in this review, that's worth a lot. Plus, the movie's only 2 hours of torture as opposed to however long it takes you to read 500 pages of drivel. So when all is said and done, the movie may not be better, but I liked it better. So that's what we're going with. And there's my Books vs. Movies review of Twilight. Hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks to my fellow reviewers for helping me out, and just in case anyone is getting any ideas about me reviewing the rest of the series, I have this to say. See ya!